The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard of Windsor Castle as Queen Camilla stepped out of her black Bentley. She wore a deep blue dress that matched the sapphires in her crown, a magnificent piece that had belonged to Queen Mary decades ago. The crown caught the sunlight and sparkled like stars against the ancient stone walls of the castle. Standing at attention near the main entrance was Royal Guard James Morrison, a man of 35 years who had served the crown faithfully for over a decade. His red uniform was perfectly pressed, his black boots polished to mirror shine. James had witnessed countless royal ceremonies and met many members of the royal family, but today felt different somehow. Queen Camilla approached the entrance with her usual grace, accompanied by two ladies-in-waiting and a small security detail. Her heels clicked rhythmically against the cobblestones as she made her way toward where James stood. The other guards in the vicinity immediately snapped to attention and offered their traditional bows as she passed. James watched the queen approach, noting how she seemed to slow her pace as she neared his position. There was something in her expression that caught his attention, a subtle look of expectation, perhaps even challenge. She adjusted her crown slightly, making sure it caught the morning light, and her eyes met his directly. The moment stretched between them like a taut string. Around the courtyard, other staff members had paused in their duties to observe the Queen's arrival. The silence was broken only by the distant sound of traffic from the long walk and the gentle rustle of leaves in the ancient oak trees that surrounded the castle. Grounds Queen Camilla stopped directly in front of James, close enough that he could smell her elegant perfume and see the intricate details of her crown up close. The diamonds and pearls seemed to dance in the light, creating tiny rainbows that reflected off the stone walls behind them. She stood there for several seconds, her posture regal and commanding, clearly expecting the traditional gesture of respect. But James remained perfectly still, his shoulders straight and his gaze steady. He did not bow. He did not lower his eyes. Instead, he maintained his military bearing and looked directly at the Queen with what could only be described as quiet dignity. His decision was not born from disrespect or rebellion, but from something much deeper and more complex. The Queen's eyebrows raised almost imperceptibly. She had grown accustomed to immediate deference from all palace staff and guards. This unexpected response caught her completely off guard. For a woman who had spent years earning her place in the royal family and establishing her authority, this moment represented something she had not anticipated. The ladies-in-waiting behind her exchanged worried glances. The security detail shifted uncomfortably, uncertain how to respond to this unprecedented situation. Even the pigeons that usually cooed from the castle's towers seemed to have fallen silent, as if nature itself was holding its breath to see what would happen next. James felt the weight of every eye upon him, but his resolve did not waver. His military training had taught him discipline and respect for authority, but life had taught him something equally important about dignity and personal principles. The morning air felt charged with tension as the standoff continued. Queen Camilla tilted her head slightly, studying this guard who dared to break royal protocol. She could see in his eyes that this was not a moment of simple defiance or disrespect. There was something deeper at work here, something that made her pause rather than immediately demand explanation or action from her security team. The castle walls seemed to lean in closer, as if the ancient stones themselves were witnesses to this extraordinary moment. History had been made within these walls for centuries, but rarely had such a simple gesture, or lack thereof, carried so much weight and meaning. As the seconds ticked by, both the Queen and the guard seemed to be engaged in a silent conversation that transcended words. It was a moment that would be remembered by everyone present, a moment that challenged assumptions and expectations about power, respect, and human dignity. The morning breeze stirred the Queen's hair and made the feathers in her hat flutter gently. James remained motionless, a statue of determination and principle. Neither seemed willing to be the first to break this extraordinary standoff that had developed in the heart of one of Britain's most historic locations. The tension in the courtyard grew thicker as Queen Camilla finally broke the silence. Her voice was measured and controlled, carrying the authority of her position but also a hint of genuine curiosity that surprised even herself. "Guard Morrison," she said, having read his name badge with careful attention, "I believe protocol requires a certain gesture of respect when royalty passes." James met her gaze steadily, his voice clear and respectful but firm. Your Majesty, I mean no disrespect to your person or your position. My service record speaks to my loyalty to the crown and to this institution. The Queen's eyes narrowed slightly as she processed his response. She had expected either immediate compliance or stammering excuses, not this calm and articulate explanation that seemed to promise more depth than she had anticipated. Then explain to me, Guard Morrison, why you choose to stand there like a statue while your fellow guards show proper respect. Her tone was not angry, but genuinely puzzled, as if she was trying to solve a mystery that had unexpectedly presented itself on what should have been a routine morning. James took a deep breath, knowing that his next words would either justify his position or end his career. Your Majesty, 3 weeks ago I received news that my younger brother was killed while serving our country in Afghanistan. He was 28 years old, a medic who died trying to save wounded soldiers under enemy fire. The Queen's expression softened almost imperceptibly, but she remained silent, sensing that there was more to this story than a simple tale of grief. Tommy Morrison was everything good about service to others, James continued, his voice steady despite the emotion behind his words. He believed that respect should be earned through actions, not simply granted through birth or title. He spent his last months writing letters to our family about the local children he was helping, the schools he was protecting, the lives he was saving. The ladies in waiting behind the Queen shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether they were witnessing insubordination or something else entirely. The security detail remained alert but made no move to intervene, perhaps sensing that this conversation was taking an unexpected but important turn. Queen Camilla adjusted her crown again, but this time the gesture seemed less about display and more about composure. I am sorry for your loss, Guard Morrison. Your brother died a hero's death in service to his country, but I fail to see how this justifies breaking protocol with his queen. James nodded respectfully. Tommy wrote in his final letter that he had learned something important during his service. He said that true respect comes not from bowing to power but from standing tall for principles. He wrote that a person's worth should be measured by their actions and character, not by the circumstances of their birth. The morning sun had climbed higher now, casting the entire scene in bright, clear light that seemed to illuminate not just their faces, but the complexity of the moment they were sharing. Other castle staff had begun to gather at respectful distances, sensing that something significant was happening. Your Majesty, James continued, I have spent 11 years protecting members of your family. I have taken bullets meant for others, stood guard in rain and snow, missed my own children's birthdays to ensure royal security. My respect for the institution is absolute. But after losing Tommy, I realized that the deepest form of respect I can offer is to stand as a complete person, not as someone who diminishes himself in the presence of others. Queen Camilla was quiet for a long moment, her mind processing this unexpected philosophy lesson from a palace guard. She thought about her own journey to acceptance within the royal family, the years of criticism she had endured, the way she had fought to earn her place and her respect. You speak of principles, Guard Morrison, she said finally. But surely you understand that tradition and protocol exist for important reasons. They create order and demonstrate the stability of our institutions. James nodded again. I do understand that, Your Majesty, and I would never suggest that others should follow my example. This is a personal decision based on personal circumstances. I am not advocating for the breakdown of tradition or showing disrespect to anyone who chooses to follow established protocols. The wind picked up slightly, causing the flags atop the castle towers to flutter more vigorously. The Queen's dress billowed gently around her, and she seemed to be weighing something in her mind that went far beyond simple matters of protocol and procedure. Your brother's letter, she said thoughtfully. Did he write anything else about respect and service? James allowed himself a small smile, the first break in his serious demeanor. He wrote that the greatest leaders he had met were those who inspired others to stand taller, not those who required others to make themselves smaller. He said he hoped to serve under leaders who valued his full humanity, not just his willingness to follow orders. The Queen studied James's face carefully, as if seeing him clearly for the first time. In his steady gaze and respectful bearing, she recognized something that reminded her of her own struggles to be seen as more than just a title or position. Queen Camilla took a step closer to James, her movement causing her security detail to tense slightly. But her gesture was not threatening. It was curious, almost conspiratorial. She lowered her voice so that only James could hear her clearly. Guard Morrison, you have given me much to think about this morning, she said quietly. But tell me, do you think your brother would approve of you potentially ending your career over a gesture? James considered her question carefully before responding. Your Majesty, Tommy always said that some moments in life define who we really are. He believed that when we face those moments, we have to choose between being comfortable and being true to ourselves. He chose truth even when it cost him his life. The Queen was surprised by the depth of this young man's conviction. In her years within the royal family, she had grown accustomed to people who said what they thought she wanted to hear, who bent their principles to accommodate her expectations. This encounter was forcing her to examine her own beliefs about leadership and respect. You realize that others might see your actions as disrespectful, regardless of your intentions? She asked, genuine concern creeping into her voice. I do realize that, Your Majesty, and I accept full responsibility for any consequences that may come from my choice. But I also believe that authentic respect is more valuable than forced compliance. When someone bows to you because they are required to do so, what does that really mean? When someone treats you with dignity because they genuinely value you as a person, isn't that more meaningful? The Queen found herself nodding almost involuntarily. She thought about the countless ceremonial bows she had received over the years, and how few of them had felt genuine or meaningful. She thought about the people who had shown her real respect through their actions, their loyalty, their willingness to speak honestly with her even when it was difficult. Your brother sounds like he was a remarkable young man, she said softly, the kind of person who makes a difference in the world through his character rather than his position. He was, Your Majesty. Tommy had this way of making everyone around him feel important and valued. He treated generals and privates with the same level of respect. He said that true leadership was about lifting others up, not standing above them. The Queen glanced around the courtyard, noticing that the small crowd of observers had grown larger. Staff members, other guards, and even some early morning tourists with cameras were beginning to take notice of the unusual scene playing out before them. Guard Morrison, she said, raising her voice slightly so others could hear. Your service record indicates that you have been decorated twice for bravery in the line of duty. Is that correct? Yes, Your Majesty. Once for preventing an attack on Prince William during a public engagement, and once for apprehending someone who had breached palace security. And in both instances, you put your own life at risk to protect members of my family? I did, Your Majesty. It is what I swore to do when I took this position. Queen Camilla nodded thoughtfully, her crown catching the sunlight as she moved. So you have already demonstrated your respect for the crown through actions that matter far more than any bow or curtsy ever could. James was surprised by this observation, having expected the conversation to focus on his failure to follow protocol, rather than his record of actual service. I have always tried to serve with honor, Your Majesty. Honor, the Queen repeated as if testing the word. Yes, I think that is the right word for what I see here. You are standing before me with honor, Guard Morrison. You are not hiding behind excuses or making dramatic gestures for attention. You are simply being honest about your principles while maintaining your respect for your duties. The crowd around them had grown quiet, sensing that they were witnessing something important. The Queen seemed to be working through her own thoughts as much as she was conversing with James. Tell me, she continued, if your brother were here today, what do you think he would say about this conversation? James smiled more broadly this time, and for a moment his military bearing relaxed slightly. Tommy would probably say that the best conversations happen when people are willing to be real with each other, regardless of their different positions in life. He believed that honesty was the foundation of all meaningful relationships, even relationships between a queen and her guard, especially those relationships, Your Majesty. Tommy used to say that the people with the most power have the greatest need for honest counsel, because everyone else is afraid to tell them the truth. Queen Camilla laughed softly, a sound that surprised everyone present, including herself. Your brother was not only brave, Guard Morrison, he was also wise. I think I would have liked to meet him. He would have been honored, Your Majesty, and he would have treated you with the same genuine respect he showed to everyone, not because of your title, but because of your humanity. The Queen stood quietly for a moment, considering everything that had been said. The morning was warming up now, and the initial tension of their encounter had evolved into something more like mutual understanding. The crowd around the courtyard had grown considerably, and Queen Camilla became aware that their conversation was being observed by dozens of people. Some held phones discreetly, though palace security had not yet moved to prevent any recording. The Queen realized that whatever happened next would likely become public knowledge very quickly. "Guard Morrison," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the courtyard. "You have presented me with a unique perspective this morning. But I must ask you directly, do you believe that protocols and traditions have any value at all?" James straightened his shoulders, recognizing that this question was crucial. "Your Majesty, I believe that traditions have enormous value when they serve a meaningful purpose. The changing of the guard ceremony, for instance, represents continuity and dedication to duty. Military honors at funerals represent respect for sacrifice. These traditions carry real meaning because they reflect real values. And what about the tradition of bowing to royalty?" she pressed. "I think that tradition can be meaningful when it represents genuine respect and recognition of service to the nation. But when it becomes just an empty gesture performed out of fear or habit, it loses its power to mean anything at all." The Queen nodded slowly, processing his distinction between meaningful and empty traditions. She found herself thinking about the many ceremonies she had attended, the countless bows and curtsies she had received, and how rarely she had felt truly seen or respected as a person during those moments. "Your Majesty," James continued, "may I share something my brother wrote in his final letter?" "Please do." James reached into his breast pocket and withdrew a worn piece of paper. He wrote, "The best leaders I have served under never demanded respect, they earned it. They didn't need people to bow because their actions inspired people to stand taller. Real authority comes from making others feel valued, not from making them feel small." The Queen extended her hand. "May I see that letter, Guard Morrison?" James hesitated for a moment, then carefully handed over the precious document. Queen Camilla read it slowly, her expression growing more thoughtful with each line. The courtyard remained silent as everyone waited to see what would happen next. After several minutes, the Queen looked up from the letter. "Your brother wrote beautifully about leadership and service. This passage here," she pointed to a section of the letter, "where he talks about the Afghan children he was helping. He writes that he learned more about dignity from them than from any training manual." "Yes, Your Majesty. Tommy said those children taught him that dignity cannot be taken away by circumstances, only given away by choices." "And you believe that bowing to me would be giving away your dignity?" James shook his head firmly. "No, Your Majesty. I believe that being forced to bow, or bowing simply because I am expected to, might diminish the meaning of genuine respect. If I were to bow to you now after our conversation, it would mean something entirely different than if I had bowed automatically when you first arrived." Queen Camilla found herself genuinely impressed by this distinction. She had never considered the difference between automatic deference and meaningful gesture, between fear-based compliance and authentic respect. "Guard Morrison, in your 11 years of service, have you ever felt genuine respect for any member of the royal family?" "Many times, Your Majesty. I have deep respect for the charitable work done by various family members, for their dedication to public service, for their sacrifices of privacy and personal freedom. I particularly admire the way Prince William handles the pressures of his position while remaining connected to ordinary people. And if Prince William were standing here instead of me, would you bow to him?" James considered this carefully. "If I felt that my bow would be received as genuine respect rather than mere protocol, and if I believed it would honor the person he is rather than simply acknowledge the position he holds, then yes, I might choose to bow." The Queen was struck by the complexity of this man's thinking. She had expected simple defiance or complicated excuses, but instead had found a thoughtful person grappling seriously with questions of respect, authenticity, and human dignity. "Your Majesty," James added, "I want to be clear that I do not judge others who choose to follow traditional protocols. For many people, those traditions are meaningful and important. My choice is personal and specific to my own circumstances and beliefs." Queen Camilla handed the letter back to James, her fingers lingering on the paper for a moment. "Your brother's words have given me much to consider, Guard Morrison. He seems to have understood something about leadership that many people in positions of authority never learn." "He did, Your Majesty. Tommy believed that the best leaders create environments where people can be their best selves, rather than environments where people feel they must diminish themselves to fit in." The Queen looked around the courtyard again, Noting the faces of the people watching their exchange, she saw curiosity, respect, and genuine interest in the eyes of most observers. No one seemed shocked or offended by James's stance. Instead, they appeared to be witnessing something authentic and meaningful. "Guard Morrison," she said finally, "you have challenged me to think about respect and tradition in ways I had not considered before. That is a valuable service, perhaps more valuable than any bow could ever be." The atmosphere in the courtyard had shifted completely from tension to something approaching mutual respect and understanding. Queen Camilla seemed to be wrestling with thoughts and emotions that went far deeper than the immediate situation with James Morrison. "Guard Morrison," she said thoughtfully, "I must confess something to you. In my years as a member of this family, I have often felt the weight of people's expectations and judgments. I have wondered whether the respect I receive is genuine or simply a response to my position." James was surprised by this admission of vulnerability from the Queen. "Your Majesty, may I speak freely?" "I believe you have been speaking freely all morning," she replied with a slight smile. "Please continue. I have observed your work with various charities over the years. Your dedication to supporting victims of domestic violence, your advocacy for literacy programs, your work with animal welfare organizations. These efforts show who you are as a person, beyond any title or position." The Queen's eyebrows rose slightly. She had not expected this guard to be familiar with her charitable work, much less to comment on it meaningfully. "You have noticed these activities?" "Many of us have, Your Majesty. We see the late nights you spend preparing for charity events, the way you remember details about the people you meet, the genuine emotion you show when dealing with difficult situations. That kind of service earns respect that has nothing to do with crowns or protocols." Queen Camilla felt something unexpected stirring in her chest, a recognition that she had been seen and valued for her actual contributions rather than her ceremonial role. It was a feeling she had not experienced often in royal settings. "Your brother's philosophy seems to have influenced you greatly," she observed. "It has, Your Majesty. But this conversation has also shown me something I hadn't fully understood before. You are not just someone who holds a position. You are someone who has worked to earn that position through your actions and character." The Queen was quiet for a moment, absorbing this perspective. Around them, the morning routine of the castle continued, but the crowd of observers remained, sensing that they were witnessing something historic. "Guard Morrison, if I may ask, what would it mean to you if I were to say that I respect your choice not to bow?" James looked genuinely surprised by the question. "Your Majesty, I hadn't considered that possibility. I suppose it would mean that you understand the difference between respect that is demanded and respect that is freely given. And if I were to say that your willingness to stand by your principles, even at personal cost, demonstrates exactly the kind of character that makes someone worthy of genuine respect, that would mean more to me than any commendation or decoration, Your Majesty." Queen Camilla nodded slowly, her mind made up about something that had been forming throughout their conversation. She turned slightly to address the growing crowd of observers. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the courtyard, "you have witnessed an unusual conversation this morning. Guard Morrison has demonstrated something important about the nature of respect and dignity." The crowd listened intently as she continued. "True respect cannot be commanded or demanded. It must be earned through character and action. Guard Morrison has shown both character and respect this morning, not through an empty gesture, but through honest dialogue and principled behavior." James felt his throat tighten with emotion as he realized what the Queen was doing. "Furthermore," she continued, "Guard Morrison has reminded me that the most valuable service anyone can provide to leadership is honest counsel, even when that counsel challenges our assumptions and expectations." She turned back to face James directly. "Guard Morrison, I want you to know that your service to this family has been exemplary, and your courage in standing by your principles today has been inspiring. Your brother would be proud of the man you have become." The courtyard erupted in spontaneous applause from the observers. James felt tears beginning to form in his eyes, overwhelmed by the unexpected turn the morning had taken. "Your Majesty," he said quietly, "thank you for listening to me, for trying to understand my position, and for honoring my brother's memory through your words. Thank you, Guard Morrison. for teaching an old queen something new about respect and leadership. The crowd continued to applaud as Queen Camilla prepared to continue her entrance to the castle. But before she moved, she did something that surprised everyone present, including herself. She extended her hand to James Morrison, not in the formal manner typically reserved for royal handshakes, but as one person showing respect to another. James took her hand and shook it firmly, meeting her eyes with genuine appreciation and respect. "Guard Morrison," she said as they shook hands, "I hope we will have the opportunity to speak again. I would like to hear more about your brother's philosophy and your own thoughts on service and leadership." "I would be honored, Your Majesty." As they released hands, something remarkable happened. James Morrison, of his own free will and in his own time, offered Queen Camilla a respectful nod of acknowledgement, not the formal bow required by protocol, but a genuine gesture of recognition and respect between two people who had found common ground in an unexpected conversation. News of the encounter between Queen Camilla and Guard Morrison spread rapidly throughout the palace and beyond. Within hours, social media was buzzing with videos and accounts from witnesses who had observed the extraordinary exchange. The story captured public imagination in ways that no one had anticipated. The palace press office was inundated with requests for comment, but Queen Camilla had specifically instructed that no official statement should be prepared without her direct approval. She wanted time to process what had happened and to consider the broader implications of the morning's events. That afternoon, James Morrison was called to report to his commanding officer, Colonel Richards, a stern man who had overseen palace security for 15 years. James entered the office expecting disciplinary action, possibly even dismissal from his position. "Morrison," Colonel Richards said without preamble, "I've been getting calls all day about your conduct this morning. Care to explain yourself?" James stood at attention and gave a complete account of his conversation with Queen Camilla, including the personal motivations behind his actions and the Queen's response. Colonel Richards listened without interruption, his expression unreadable. When James finished his account, the colonel was quiet for a long moment. "Morrison, in my 15 years overseeing palace security, I have never encountered a situation quite like this one." "I understand, sir. I accept full responsibility for any breach of protocol." "That's interesting, Morrison, because I've also been getting calls from very senior levels of the royal household. It seems that Her Majesty has specifically requested that no disciplinary action be taken against you." James was stunned. "She has, sir?" "Furthermore, she has requested a meeting with me to discuss what she calls the broader questions about respect and authenticity in royal service that your conversation raised for her." "Colonel," Richards walked to his window and looked out at the castle grounds, where the morning's events had unfolded. "Morrison, I'll be honest with you. When I first heard about this incident, I was prepared to have you removed from royal duties immediately. Breaking protocol with a member of the royal family is simply not acceptable." "I understand, sir. But after speaking with witnesses and reviewing your service record, I find myself in the unusual position of trying to understand something rather than simply enforcing rules." The colonel turned back to face James. "Your brother Tommy, I remember him. He served under my command briefly before his deployment. Fine soldier, sharp mind. Thank you, sir. He had this way of making everyone around him think more deeply about why we do what we do. Sounds like that tendency runs in your family." James managed a small smile. "It does, sir." Colonel Richard sat down behind his desk and gestured for James to take a seat as well, a departure from the formal standing meeting he had expected. "Morrison, what you did this morning was unprecedented, but according to every witness account I've received, it was also conducted with respect, dignity, and genuine thoughtfulness. Her Majesty herself seems to have been impressed by your character and your service record. I'm grateful for her understanding, sir. The question now is what happens next. This story is already spreading beyond palace walls. There will be media attention, public discussion, probably academic analysis of royal protocol and its meaning in modern times." James felt a wave of concern. "Sir, I never intended for this to become a public spectacle. This was a personal decision based on personal circumstances." "I believe that, Morrison, but sometimes personal decisions end up having broader significance whether we intend it or not." Colonel Richards leaned back in his chair. Her Majesty has asked me to consider whether your approach to royal service might offer insights that could be valuable for the entire security team. I'm not sure I understand, sir. She seems to believe that authentic respect and genuine service might be more valuable than automatic compliance with traditional protocols. She's wondering whether other guards might benefit from understanding the distinction you made between meaningful traditions and empty gestures. James was amazed that his morning conversation had led to such far-reaching considerations. Sir, I want to be clear that I'm not advocating for the abandonment of all protocols. Most of our procedures serve important security and ceremonial purposes. I understand that. But you've raised questions about which protocols serve real purposes and which ones might be maintained simply because that's how we've always done things. Her Majesty seems to think these are important questions for the entire royal household to consider. The colonel stood up and walked to a bookshelf lined with military manuals and historical texts about royal protocol. Morrison, I'm going to ask you to do something unusual. I want you to prepare a written analysis of your perspective on royal service, respect, and protocol. Not as a defense of your actions, but as a thoughtful contribution to a broader discussion that Her Majesty wants to have. Yes, sir. I'd be honored to do that. This analysis will be shared not only with Her Majesty, but also with other senior members of the royal household. Your thoughts could influence how royal service is understood and practiced in the future. James felt the weight of this responsibility. What had begun as a personal decision based on grief and principle was now becoming part of a larger conversation about the nature of respect, tradition, and authentic service. Sir, may I ask what you think about all of this? Colonel Richards considered the question carefully. Honestly, Morrison, you've made me think about things I'd taken for granted for years. I've seen thousands of people bow to royalty, and I'd never really considered whether those gestures meant anything beyond compliance with expectations. And now I'm wondering whether the goal of royal protocol should be to create genuine respect and meaningful ceremony, or simply to maintain traditional appearances regardless of their significance. 3 months after the courtyard encounter, the effects of that morning conversation continued to ripple through the royal household and beyond. James Morrison had submitted his analysis as requested, and it had sparked serious discussions among palace staff, royal protocol experts, and even members of the royal family themselves. Queen Camilla had indeed met with Colonel Richards and other senior staff to discuss what she called authentic service versus performative compliance. The conversations had led to subtle but meaningful changes in how palace staff interacted with royal family members, with an emphasis on genuine respect rather than rigid adherence to traditional forms. James continued his duties as a royal guard, but his role had evolved in unexpected ways. He was occasionally asked to participate in discussions about security protocols, and his insights about the difference between meaningful traditions and empty gestures had influenced several policy changes within the palace. On a crisp autumn morning, James was again stationed in the Windsor Castle courtyard when Queen Camilla approached. This time there was no tension in the air, but rather a sense of mutual respect that had developed through several follow-up conversations over the months. Good morning. Guard Morrison, she said warmly as she approached. Good morning, Your Majesty. James stood at attention, but his bearing was relaxed and natural, rather than rigid with protocol anxiety. I wanted to thank you personally for the written analysis you submitted. It has been shared with the entire royal household, and it has generated exactly the kind of thoughtful discussion I had hoped for. I'm grateful that it was useful, Your Majesty. Queen Camilla paused in front of him just as she had months earlier, but this time her expression was one of appreciation rather than expectation. Your brother's philosophy has had more influence than I think either of you could have imagined. His ideas about respect and dignity have helped us all think more clearly about why we do what we do. Tommy would be amazed, Your Majesty. He always believed that good ideas have a way of spreading when people are willing to listen to them. James, she said, using his first name for the first time, I have a proposal for you. The royal household is establishing a new position, an advisor on authentic service and protocol. The role would involve reviewing our traditions and practices to ensure they serve meaningful purposes rather than simply maintaining appearances. James was stunned by this unexpected offer. Your Majesty, I'm honored, but I'm not sure I'm qualified for such a position. Your qualification is exactly what you demonstrated that morning. 3 months ago, the ability to think critically about tradition while maintaining genuine respect for service and dedication. Your brother's insights, combined with your own experience and character, make you uniquely suited for this role. What would this position involve? Working with various departments within the royal household to examine our protocols and traditions. You would help us distinguish between practices that serve important purposes and those that might be outdated or counterproductive. Most importantly, you would help ensure that our approach to royal service creates an environment where people can serve with dignity and authenticity. James thought about his brother Tommy, about the letter that had started this entire journey, and about the unexpected path his life had taken since that morning in the courtyard. Your Majesty, if I accept this position, I want to ensure that I can continue to honor my brother's memory by advocating for authentic service and genuine respect. That is exactly what I'm hoping for.
James, your brother's wisdom deserves to have lasting influence.
And I believe this role would allow you to share those insights with people throughout the royal household and beyond. The autumn breeze stirred the leaves around the courtyard, and James found himself thinking about how much had changed since that first encounter. The queen who had once expected automatic deference now stood before him as someone who valued his thoughts and respected his principles. Your Majesty, I would be honored to accept this position. Queen Camilla smiled genuinely. Expression of satisfaction and anticipation. Excellent. Your first project will be working with our protocol office to develop guidelines for meaningful ceremony versus empty tradition. I think your brother would approve of that assignment. I believe he would, Your Majesty. As they concluded their conversation, James realized that something remarkable was about to happen. Queen Camilla stepped back slightly and, to his amazement, offered him a respectful nod of acknowledgement, not the formal gesture of royalty to subject, but the authentic recognition of one person who respects another. James returned the gesture with equal sincerity, and in that moment, both of them understood that they had created something new together. They had found a way to honor tradition while embracing authenticity, to maintain respect while encouraging dignity, and to preserve the value of ceremony while eliminating the emptiness of mere compliance. The story of Queen Camilla and Guard Morrison became more than just an anecdote about royal protocol. It became an example of how genuine dialogue between people of different positions can lead to understanding, growth, and positive change. Tommy Morrison's philosophy of authentic respect had influenced not just his brother's choices, but the very nature of royal service itself. As James began his new role in the weeks that followed, he carried with him his brother's letter and the lessons learned from an unexpected conversation in a castle courtyard. He discovered that standing up for principles, when done with respect and sincerity, could lead to opportunities to serve in ways he had never imagined. Queen Camilla, for her part, found that embracing authentic dialogue and genuine respect had enriched her own understanding of leadership and service. She had learned that true authority comes not from demanding deference, but from inspiring others to bring their best selves to their work. The morning when a royal guard chose not to bow had become the beginning of a new chapter in royal service, one where tradition and authenticity could coexist, where respect could be both given and earned, and where the wisdom of a fallen soldier could continue to make a difference in the world through the courage and character of those who remembered his teachings. In the end, both Queen Camilla and James Morrison discovered that the most profound respect is not shown through gestures of submission, but through the willingness to see and value each other's full humanity, regardless of the different roles they play in the world.